Hello, and welcome to the Smart Inclusion Podcast, where we connect the dots between investing in people, investing capital, and preserving the planet. Each episode brings you powerful stories from thought leaders like women, indigenous people, and unsung heroes who are driving the global energy transition forward. This podcast ties together the complex threads of sustainability, showing how the public can engage with new opportunities in energy transition and invest in their communities. Whether you're interested in the future of energy, climate change, sustainable investing, or understanding why these changes matter to you, Smart Inclusion delivers insightful conversations that break down what's happening, what's on the horizon, and how you can be part of this transformational movement. I'm your host, Todd Q. Adams. Hello, and welcome to the Smart Inclusion Podcast. I'm Todd Q. Adams, your host. And today, in today's discussion and talk on equity economics, we're going to talk all about urban planning. We're going to take a deep dive into urban planning and talk about its connection to equity economics and why it's important in our energy transition. We have our guest today, Dr. Jeffrey Lowe, who is with Texas Southern University, a professor. Would love to just introduce yourself, Dr. Lowe.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me. I am a professor, an associate professor, in fact, in the Department of Urban Planning and Environmental Policy at Texas Southern University. The Department of Urban Planning and Environmental Policy is located in the Barbara Jordan Mickey Leland School of Public Affairs. And I also serve as the director of the Center of Excellence for Housing and Community Development Policy Research.
Okay, that's all a mouthful. However, I know you as this guy who is just dedicated to really serving people and what you do. And just your inspiration, like what inspired you to do this, in terms of just share that a little bit of that.
Yes. Well, what Todd didn't mention was we go way back. We were both undergrads at Howard University. And both of us were really involved and engaged, not just on activities on campus, but also off campus, working in the community, what today many people might call community engagement. Mm-hmm. And so even after leaving Howard, I continued to be engaged in working with communities to improve the quality of life in communities. Well, at some point in my career, which was more at that time, more in business or information systems, I was involved in a particular activity that exposed me to the field of urban planning and understanding that was more in line with my passion. I made a career change and went on to earn a PhD in urban planning and policy development from Rutgers University in New Brunswick. And ultimately, I joined the faculty at Texas Southern University to help advance the planning program there, the urban planning program, and also direct the Center of Excellence. I'm the founding director of the center there that focuses on housing and community development policy research.
Okay, it's interesting that you said, of course, all those things that you shared, I remember all of that. I remember when you made that decision to PhD, and I remember even you coming to our home in Cleveland when you were doing your research for your PhD in Cleveland. So we have been discussing these things for quite a while, really about social justice, right, environmental justice, urban planning, and some intersection of all of those, whether it be in the dorm room at Howard University that we were doing that in today. Here we are, fast forward, and we're engaging in talking about urban planning as it relates to your journey and getting your insights today as to why that is so important for our energy transition. And part of what you shared with me earlier in your journey, too, is that you are currently doing some work related to, at early stages, but AI and affordable housing. And so oftentimes when we think about artificial intelligence, we don't think about equity and we don't think about things like affordable housing. Why don't you share why is that so important, even to begin in the early stages of incorporating that into how we design and build homes and affordable housing?
Yes. So equity is really important when we think about where we want to move forward with our communities, especially with housing. There's a lot of interconnection between, and as planners, let me preface my remarks to say, as planners, we really focus on the interaction between the built environment and the natural environment. And how does that serve to improve the quality of life? So many policies in the past have actually worked to the detriment of our communities, especially Black and Brown communities in this country, from redlining to zoning to transportation. And earlier we were talking about the Justice 40 initiative, where 40% of federal investment must go to communities, Black and Brown communities, underserved communities, that historically have not been invested in, to transform them, if you will, to the future. And certainly public policy intervention plays a huge role in changing structures that lead to the transformation that will bring about a better quality of life. And so one area that I think that certainly ties energy together with affordable and sustainable housing is really in the area of distributed generation, right? When we talk about energy, historically, we, in many of our communities, as you already know, that we've had certain industries, plants, and what have you, that have led to a real degradation in our communities. And the Justice 40 initiative tying, again, housing, energy, transportation, and other investments together to improve our communities is where we're heading towards with this initiative.
You raise an excellent point. And so raise an excellent point in that intersection of energy. So I think about your work, you're working with HUD and having some grants associated with HUD at Texas Southern as an example, where HUD is building out affordable homes across the country. I recently read 20,000 homes. So all of this, 20,000 homes that are energy efficient, also climate resilient as well, and affordable in that. And so we also have the benefit that when you talk about Justice 40, the community benefits, workforce. So people who now we're having job creation, skilled trades, construction jobs, electricians. We're reducing the energy, you can reduce the energy burden, energy costs for people. That also has a value to the grid if you can now begin to manage the load at affordable homes if you're intentional about that. So the point is, coming back to equity economics, urban planning, if you do this at mass and at scale across this country, that ties into this urban planning framework to do that. So everything that you're talking about, that's the kind of the tie-in with urban planning as it relates to that. Artificial intelligence and AI, you made a reference to that earlier. How can that, because right now, AI is everything you hear. Now we're looking at practical applications. What are you looking at as it relates to sort of looking at homes being energy efficient, smarter, or whatever? Just early stage, what's important from an urban planning, through an urban planning lens?
Well, Todd, you're right. I think it all does connect together. And from an urban planning perspective, as well as a policy perspective, let me try to set it up in this way. First, with the Center of Excellence for Housing and Community Development Policy Research, undoubtedly that sponsored research, because the Center of Excellence was established through an award where Texas Southern University and Howard University were the first HBCUs to receive funding to establish a center of excellence, a HUD funded center of excellence. That's the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, to be exact. That would not have happened if it wasn't really for the Justice 40 initiative, I believe. Now, with that setup, that allows institutions like Texas Southern that have historically been teaching institutions to now begin to focus on research that will help to influence policymakers and decision makers with an understanding to that will lead to the transformation of our communities. It also allows us to do research around energy, renewable energy, as well as you put it, looking at how we create energy efficient housing, affordable housing, and certainly sustainable housing in place. So historically, for example, in many of our communities, you might find the power plant or the power utility station where the transformers are, right? A centralized generation of power. If a storm, a natural disaster, or the transformer blows, it could shut down power in an entire community, right? What we see happening now, and the research is borne this out as well, is that moving from the centralized generation to more of a distributed generation leads to smart communities, better communities. It allows for, in a number of ways, not only is the house, as we create these places, does the house, and we're in a housing crisis, where a number of households are insecure with their housing because of affordability cost, that it through AI, through renewable energies, when we distribute power in a different way, such as solar paneling on the home, that then allows for cost efficiency, right? It's more cost effective, for example. And so it could lead to a number of benefits for the homeowner. It could be that their disposable income increases because some of the energy that is generated through the solar paneling can be sold back to the energy company, right? It can become more equitable in terms of job producing, especially if it's localized through distributed generation, where in a particular neighborhood or a particular locale, local people become more employed, right? It also boosts what I like to think about as energy security. When your power is distributed in one place and that transformer blows, it could take out power for the whole neighborhood. However, if it's distributed, if you have your own solar panels, you're less likely to lose power or energy in the case of a storm.
You presented a lot of points, Dr. Lowe. So I'm going to connect the dots on a few things that you said as it relates to this is all equity economics. And the first thing you talked about, first of all, we know that there are predictions about the electric load, increasingly multifold, 2-3-fold over the next, depending upon what you read, simply because we're electrifying homes, electrification of EVs, et cetera, as our world becomes more electrified. So that load of a public utility, as an example, they often don't have the generation capacity to sustain that. So it becomes a benefit to have a decentralized grid, is what you're making reference to, which now ties actually, there can be some economic benefits without going too deep into all the economic models.
Absolutely.
So, but as a general rule, that can be true. Secondly, it can lend itself to some form of energy independence or some sort of economic justice for a community or people who are then able to own their generation as a commodity and then negotiate it as a commodity. And whether it be for revenue, whether it be for reducing their bill, there's a lot of different, and if it's aggregated in different ways, like through community solar or whatever the case may be, that can even be done at scale, at commercial and potentially even utility scale. So those are things so the bottom line is that you can have others participate in this clean energy economy through some intentionality, and Justice 40 becomes an avenue and a vehicle for that, is what I'm hearing you say, simply because you're looking at maybe a public utility partnering with a tribal nation, partnering with a community-based organization, partnering in ways that they've never partnered before, and driving mutual benefits and community benefits like workforce and jobs, and reducing carbon pollutants in a community by deploying these, and actually increasing healthcare and public health outcomes, such as respiratory problems, which are disproportionately impact Black and Brown and Latino communities. What's so interesting is that the federal government and the EPA has tools that you can go on, environmental justice screening tools that you can go on and you can see this data in real time. So everything you talked about, urban planning is an integral part of that. So forward looking, I'm hearing you say this Justice 40, which is 40% of the $2 trillion approximate dollars that have been allocated or funded so far for infrastructure projects, that there's an opportunity to create wealth, real wealth, business development, and job creations in Black, Brown communities that we have. So, as we're looking forward, urban planning and people like you who actually can provide the research, because they're in equities and research as well. There are a lot of the social science research that actually is needed to accompany the technical and the economic feasibility research doesn't exist.
That's right, Todd. And you've tied it together, really brilliantly here. The timetable for the initiative, I think, is set out to 2050. I believe.
Yeah. So the funding is through is over the next decade or so, and of course our energy transition and reaching net zero global goals is 2050. With that being said, and hopefully this will catalyze more private investment. It'll also strengthen communities in ways that they can compete and we can compete. And then there also are shared benefits. So the community benefits that are to be realized are benefits for all. So this is not about charity. It's not about a zero-sum game. It's actually about economic development and empowerment in ways that drive our economy, position this nation to be a leader in the global clean energy economy in an inclusive kind of a way, and growing our economy is what we're looking at. And urban planning and equitable research is an integral part of that for community building and community development as we look forward, as we build infrastructure, electrification infrastructure, and then essentially is that we have real communities where everybody wins.
And I think if I can just add here, what's really important to the work that you're doing and the focus on equity economics, that also ties into all that you've just said is the intention of lifting all boats. Mm-hmm. Because historically, we know there has been a lot of inequities, but through Justice 40, it's intentional in focusing on eradicating those historical inequities, so communities that have been left out can be raised up along with everyone else. From a planning perspective, I should also mention that, again, the balance between the natural environment and the built environment becomes really important. In some places, so that makes it place-based, and some places are further along than others. So when we look at, for example, just at the state level, California seems to be one of the states that tends to be on the leading edge when it comes to, the distribution, generation of the energy supply. I can think of in California where 70 acres have already been in place to build a solar energy facility that will provide energy for up to 7,500 households in one area. So, you have that model, but again, I think what we see as we're developing smart communities and distributing the energy supply, what seems to be gaining traction in a number of places, not just California, but across the nation, really the best example that really comes to mind is the solar paneling on households.
Yes, thanks a lot. Thanks a lot for that. California has always been a leader. Mm-hmm. Not to plug California, but but they have in terms of clean energy and solutions. But the bigger point is that this is an opportunity to welcome and democratize the energy transition and begin to look at various technical solutions and that are inclusive, that enable business development and wealth building, as well as addressing climate change. So, thank you, Dr. Lowe, for sharing, everything around how connecting urban planning and policy to our energy transition and an equitable energy transition. And we also want to just thank you for just listening and watching this podcast. And, and as we focus on equity economics and highlighting how urban planning is essential to equity economics in moving our energy transition forward and ensuring a successful energy transition. So I'm asking you to please like, share, comment, give your insights, and looking forward to engaging you on our future podcasts. Thank you.